Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to meet you all. The purpose of me delivering this training session or talk today is just to outline some of the standardisation expectations and evidence requirements for STP training activities. The way that we've done this is from a training officer's perspective. So my job title is the lead education and training in aseptic manufacturing. I'm based at the Royal Liverpool Hospital Foundation Trust, and we are part of the University Hospitals Liverpool Group. We specialise in pharmaceutical science, and I'll give you an overview of that shortly. But next slide, please, Sally. Just as an overview of what I'm going to speak about, so I'll give you an overview, as I say, of what is pharmaceutical science. Then I'll go on to talk about the Pharmaceutical Science STP Training Officer network, which we set up. Then give you an overview of two different types of trackers. So the STP Training Activity Tracker and then the STP Training Officer Expectation Tracker. And then just a brief overview of overall what the positive outcomes of this is and what we have seen since we've implemented this as a training officer group. So next slide, please. So what is pharmaceutical science? It's a bit of a niche topic area, and it's not one of the most common STP specialisms, but we are definitely a growing area. So how it works is we are split into 4 different quadrants. So we have aseptics as a rotation, radiopharmacy as a rotation, quality control, and then classical manufacturing. So we specialise in the production of aseptically prepared products, and we work in clean room environments. So these are for medicines which are really risky to administer. So you're thinking about things which are intrathecally, intraocular, intravenously, intramuscular. So all of these different methods of administration that are bypassing the body's main defense mechanisms, we are responsible for manufacturing and supplying. So just click for me, Sally, please. We are regulated by the MHRA, and everything that we do is under good manufacturing practice. So we are audited on a 2-yearly basis, and we hold a manufacturing license and an IMP license, which is investigational medicinal product license, which means that we can also be involved in the manufacture or dispensing and supply of clinical trial medications. Next slide, please. So as I know that some of you, or most of you even, won't be from a pharmaceutical science specialism, I just wanted to tap in and say what the clinical relevance of the work that we do is actually for. So I've focused on two of the main quadrants. So one is aseptics and one is radiopharmacy. So in terms of aseptics and the things that we produce, a lot of them are gastrointestinal patients or renal patients, patients receiving chemotherapy, those that fall under the arthritic patients umbrella, or ophthalmology patients. The vast majority of medicines that we produce are mainly for a therapeutic focus. And then you have radiopharmacy as the other main quadrant. So you have radio with a very relevant diagnostic focus. So at Liverpool, we have a major focus on the production of technetium-99, which is a radioisotope, and it's the daughter of molybdenum. Which essentially can be administered and can diagnose a range of different clinical conditions. With radiopharmacy, there is quite a lot of emphasis on new isotopes that are up and coming for diagnostic, therapeutic, and theranostic purposes, where you are looking at different isotopes, obviously, for either therapeutic reasons, or where you have that dual focus of either therapeutic and diagnostic, which is where the theranostic terminology comes in. So I hope that gives you a brief overview about what we're about. And just as a funny slide, if you just click next, please, I'll show you a little bit about what we have to wear and what the facility looks like. So the facility is a clean room environment, and this is where we work. And then if you just click again, Sally, sorry, this is the fashion. So this is how we look when we are producing the medicines or the therapeutic and diagnostic entities. Different units will have different sorts of PPE, but this is what we wear in our supporting and setup areas. So to talk about sharing best practice, if you'd like to click on the next slide, Sally, please. I don't know if you just want to click through all the animations. I'm sorry, just so I'm not constantly reminding you. So what we've done as part of the Pharmaceutical Science STPTO network is we decided that there was a lot of difference between the way that people were being trained as a trainee. There was a lot of common problems that training officers were facing. So what we did is we decided to set up a training officer network. So I've shown 2 photographs there. So Megan, who is the lead QA scientist at Radio Pharmacy, she is the chair of the STPTO network, and I am her sort of co-chair or deputy chair. We have 32 attendees from all 4 different disciplines, so all 4 quadrants that I've shown you before: aseptics, radio pharmacy, QC, and classical manufacturing. So there are 32 of us nationally that we have managed to sort of come together. And as I say, we're not a hugely popular specialism, so having 32 attendees who are all training officers is quite impressive. Our meeting frequency, so our training officer meetings are every quarter. So we have 1 in January, 1 in April, 1 in July, and 1 in October. We'll discuss problems. I'll show you a little bit more about what we discuss when I show you the agenda, but it's more of a forum and a network, and this was created through knowing mutual colleagues, people who have done the STP before, so ex-STP students who had known each other from their student days. There were a number of different service leads that we were able to contact from different workforce groups which we know existed. Meg and I have attended several National School of Healthcare Science conferences where we've met and linked into different pharmaceutical science training officers from all around England, really. And we were able to sort of hook them in and say, we have this network ongoing if you would like to join. And then again, LinkedIn as a social media platform, we've managed to recruit some attendees, if you like. Okay, so next slide. The agenda of the meeting is as follows. So this is obviously very, very bland. I've taken everything out, but just so you can see things that we discuss, if you want to just skip through the animation, Sally, sorry. So we have rotations, which we discuss. Things like accreditation and re-accreditation. So there are a lot of units that you find, a lot of facilities who are wanting to host an STP student to increase their workforce, but what you find is that they don't know how to go about it. So we can discuss things like this at the TO network. But one of the main things that we focused on is the standardisation of training. So one thing that was coming up consistently is how can you standardise training to ensure fair and consistent training for all trainees, no matter their base location. So this was a problem that we were finding, and I think with pharmaceutical science, the level of activity that you can do in your sort of base location is highly dependent on the regulatory status of your unit. So different trainees were basically obtaining different training depending on where they were based. So how we managed to combat this, next slide, Sally, please. Thank you, is we started to accumulate a range of the training activities that were stipulated by the National School of Healthcare Science, and we started to look at what type of training activity that they were. The DOPs, the OCEs, and the CBDs that were required as part of their modules, the evidence as a minimum that was required, and then as part of the STPTO network, what we've done was come together and say, what do you expect? What do I expect? And we've come up with a baseline standard. So this is just an example for one of the specialist modules, which is aseptics. If you just click through the animation, Sally, sorry. If you just do a couple more. Perfect, thank you. So just as a breakdown, because obviously there is a lot of information on that one slide, what you have is your minimum expectation. So depending on whether it's being stipulated by the National School as an ETA, a DTA or an OTA, you have a certain level of evidence that is required as part of your one file submissions. So what we have is we outline what type of training activity is required. You have your title provided by the National School of Healthcare Science. So obviously that is the title of that training activity. Then you have your example minimum expectations from the TO. So this particular bit here is just for the CBDs, the DOPs and the OCEs. So if you like to continue through, and I'll continue with the breakdown of this slide. Perfect. So then what you have is the training activity number, the type of activity, where you can dictate the quantity of evidence. So what I've done is I've just highlighted on the left-hand side there where it says the type of activity, and then where it says the type of the quantity of evidence, I've just highlighted it on the right-hand side in the box there. If you would just like to click again. So you have the title of your training activity. Here you have the column where you have the considerations from the National School website. So on the curriculum library on the National School website, you have a breakdown of what is expected. Now, these would be decided by experts from your own specialisms, but then the reality versus the actual considerations can often differ, which is what different training officers were struggling with. So if you'd just like to go to the next slide, please. So what we now have is the reality of evidence submissions. So for each of the different training activities, what you'll have is it's broken down into the type of training activity that it is. So as I say, with the first one being an ETA, you would be expecting sorry, it's a DTA. So you will be expecting 3 different levels of evidence. So your evidence for the first one would be the production of a report, for instance. Then you would also expect a reflection of some form, and then an action plan. So going forward, how are they going to improve on a set technique or a set process, or an activity that you expect them to be able to develop onto, with the idea being that in time and once they're qualified, it would go from a DTA to an ETA. In practice. Next slide, please. Just to work this through as an example, just so you understand, because obviously I've broken that down into quite a lot of different portions, but with this one here, I won't go through the details because obviously a lot of you guys won't be from pharmaceutical science, so it won't really make much sense. But the type of activity is an ETA, so again, you will be requiring a different 2 pieces of evidence here. So you would trend and critically evaluate physical and micro environmental monitoring results. So that's one of the TAs that's expected, which in pharmaceutical science, this is definitely an entrusted training activity for an STP trainee. And once they're qualified, they could lead on these type of projects and services. The considerations from the national school are exactly what you would expect, really, but then the reality is slightly different. So in terms of your example TO expectations and your one file submissions, your evidence will be them showing that they can take responsibility of the physical data. So them being able to discuss and demonstrate on paper that they are able to take responsibility for the physical data. They would know how it was validated. Is it all within limits? So with me saying before that we're regulated by the MHRA, everything has set standards, and we can refer back to either numerical data or set regulatory standards, which are in official documents. So they need to be able to link those two parameters together. Then in terms of a reflection or any further recommendations, what you would expect is for them to be able to demonstrate a reflective piece and be able to monitor the reflective piece using the correct models, if you like. So whether or not in your specialisms, things like the Gibbs model of reflection is best for you and your specialism, or whether the Driscoll's model is, you obviously have to decide it yourself, but they need to be able to reflect on it and provide time frames, and they need to be able to reflect and demonstrate how in the future they are going to continue to be able to do this training activity. With this being an ETA, so an entrusted training activity, you don't need your third piece of evidence, which is an action plan. So here, that is just not applicable. Next slide, please, Sally. Now, in addition to this, and obviously with all the work that's being done from the from the TO group, and that slide that I've just shown you is obviously just one example, but this has been done for all of the modules, whether it be core, rotational, or specialists, and for all of the different quadrants. But what we've done alongside this is also develop the trainee activity trackers, and it was actually my trainee that started with this. Now, what you do find is trainees, and it's probably the same across all specialisms, but all trainees will come, they'll start in their new positions, and they will probably create their own Excel spreadsheet where they are tracking their own activities, if you like. So what we've done is we developed one for pharmaceutical science. It's all color coded in terms of the different rotations and the different modules. Again, the information that's shown on these is significantly drawn back than what's on the activity tracker for the training officer. So as a trainee, all you have here is the training activity, the type of training activity, the description, and then the actions to take, your own personal time scale, and then the deadline dictated by the national school. So as you know, with like the likes of your rotational modules, the deadline dictated by the national school is within the first year of study. In our specialism anyway, it may differ for you guys, so apologies. And then the specialty modules, you want them done by the second year, and then the third year you've got a key focus on your project and backfilling any difficult areas that you've not managed to come through. Obviously, the whole time you're also thinking about your core modules and ticking them off in a timely fashion. The timescale column is mainly for the trainee themselves. So although the deadline may be September of the following year, their own personal deadline may be May. So it gives them something to work towards. And what we now do is when we're doing the progress reviews for our trainees, and you sit down and we do the one-to-one monthly progress reviews on one file, we use these particular trackers, the trainee activity trackers, to assess the progress and do the next steps. So this has become very, very useful for us as a training officer network. Next slide, please, Sally. This is just a further example, but I've spoke through this really, but just to obviously highlight that in the assessments sort of top column, if you remember from the activity tracker for the training officers, there was a whole range of different CBDs, DOPs and OCEs. Now, obviously, the CBD is dictated by the trainee and the training officer because they can be a range of different topics, if you like. But on the trainee activity tracker, what you have is just the required number that you need. So for instance, on this rotational module, which is an intro to aseptics for pharmaceutical science, although there are several different DOPs and OCE opportunities, only one or the other is required on one file in order to sign off the module. So the trainee won't have an overload. It's literally just the minimum expectation for them to complete. So it's a lot more manageable for them. So yeah, as I say, the agreed action and the actions to take column is how the trainee and the training officer want to go about completion of this training activity. Timescale is a personal target, and the deadline is the one file dictated by the national school target. Next slide, please. And just to reiterate the positive outcomes that have come of this. So when I say the positive outcomes, we're looking at things that have come from the STP Training Officer network, and then the development of both the trainee trackers and the training officer expectation trackers. What you do have and what has been discussed is there's a range of STP Training Officer support. There's a lot of rotation support. So where people are struggling to get the trainees to have experience in various areas, people are willing to help each other. There is a lot of swaps going on with trainees. So if you can have my trainee, I can have your trainee, and there's a supportive network that builds there. It's a really good opportunity, to network with fellow colleagues, which can be distributed all around the country, where otherwise you wouldn't really have a chance to meet them. Standardisation of training, so you've got that confidence that the quality of training that's being given to the trainees is it is standardized across the board. So when they qualify, they should be able to do the exact same things to the exact same standards. For various units, obviously, we all know that we need to go through a reaccreditation process. So there's that support there. If there's been any changes since the last time that you've done it, it's discussed there. Any additional evidence or examples of evidence that need to be submitted, any additional problems with training plans and things, that's all discussed at the training officer meetings. It's support for trainees because you can put them in contact with various trainees from various units, albeit they may already know them from uni, but they may not. So it's a good support for them too. It's a forum for discussion and consistent improvement. You build quality assurance, as I say, in the training that's being delivered, and you set an expectation. So from the get-go, the trainee and the training officer has an expectation of what should be delivered and to the quality and the level that it should be delivered. But having the training officer network there and these expectations written down in an Excel spreadsheet as a tracker, it drives initiative. So loads of people will then come back to the training officer group and say, I haven't done it like this, but alternatively, I've done it in this way. And it may well be a different way. which equally is acceptable. It may be an improvement on what's already on the tracker, which we can then adopt. And as a result of that, we're all sharing each other's best practice. Next slide, please, Sally. Okay, and I just want to say thank you for listening. I hope people have taken that on board. And if anyone's got any questions or wants to contact me, then I am happy to go through it.